Thank you for joining me this evening for Premier 30. And tonight we're going to be going on discussing about the internal map of reality and meditation in general. Now we've been moving along and we're about to going into a topic which is very, very powerful. And the topic tonight is time. Understanding your timeline. So we'll do a little introduction to how we perceive time and how we use it both consciously and unconsciously. We'll do a little exercise on how to begin to, play with how we internalize time. And then there'll be a discussion about time as one of our most important filters. Now we've did a whole discussion on filters. So this is another filter, a very important filter. Now, as usual, we will do our 1-minute meditation, and I really like those. I enjoy them, and I think it's a great practice. Just taking 1 minute, and you can do that at any point during the day that you need to take a little time to reset. You can do this 1-minute meditation, and hopefully you're doing longer meditations, 5, 10, 15, 20. A good half hour of sitting quietly, meditating is very, very beneficial. Now, I've also included the color meditation. It's in the comment section. And I think next week I'll put in a couple other links to guided meditations for you as well. But today we're going to get right into it and do our 1-minute meditation, followed immediately by our introduction into time. So sit comfortable, feet flat on the floor, shoulders relaxed, eyes open or closed, whichever you feel comfortable with. And we'll do our 1-minute meditation now. Before we do that, let's look at a quote from Napoleon Hill, who I consider to be one of the first really big promoters of looking at the way we think as being the pivotal, important thing. Now, there were others, but Napoleon certainly made his mark. So here's one of his quotes. "Don't wait. The time will never be just right." And he's so true about that. And if we keep waiting for that moment when things are just right, well, that just might not happen. Okay, so we've done 4 sessions so far. We did the initial session 1, where we took a little look at what a map is and why we have it. And then in session 2, we looked into how we communicate, how we actually think. And this technique of looking at the way we think with our modes of thinking and frames is how we communicate with our subconscious and how our subconscious communicates with us. And this is a universal way of communicating. So you can communicate with any other person on the planet through this technique. And I believe you can communicate with other life forms like plants and animals, because they all communicate through frames of sensory information. Then we went into beliefs, which looks at how we develop strategies or beliefs about what we need to do. So beliefs in this context is about what do you believe that you need to do to satisfy your inner desires. And then we just completed session 4 on filters, which looked at how we eliminate all the information that is not pertinent to our beliefs. So if something isn't key to your strategies for achieving what you desire, you won't even see it, you won't even consider it, you won't even look at it. So filters are a way of distilling down your reality to the key things that you believe are pertinent to getting what you want out of life. Now, filters can be of benefit, or they can, in fact, limit you. So with that in mind, we're going to move on and look at timelines, the way that your understanding of your timeline can limit or, in fact, strengthen you. In future sessions, since we're about halfway through, we'll look at values, and we're going back to what drives our belief system, which is our values, and they are in a hierarchy. And understanding your hierarchy of values is a key thing. So if you have that right, everything else just falls in place. Then we'll look at meta programs, which are the strategies in a more elaborate structure that we have adopted. And some of the things in meta programs are our beliefs in iconic. Why do people worship actors and actresses and people in the media? They become icons. Why do we have icons? And then moving on, as we get to session 8, we're going to start working on strategies for motivation. How can you use this knowledge to be motivated every day to work as hard as you can to achieve what you want? And then we'll be moving further on in section 9, looking at life goals. And then in the final session, session 10, we'll be looking at modeling. And there's 2 types of ways that we can model ourselves and get information from other people's behaviors, both successful ones and unresourceful ones. I won't go into the resources too greatly. I've done this each beginning of each session, but I'll leave this up for a moment and you can look at it later. Okay. And of course, our Patreon level members will receive more guided instruction. Contact information, and again, if you want to reach me, just go to my Proton Mail, STO2015@protonmail.com. Or if you're a Patreon member, you can just message me through the Patreon system. Okay, so the internal map of reality, the timeline, what is it? So we'll be talking about what the timeline is and how it's constructed. Then we'll look at how our subconscious works with time, and our subconscious has a different perception of time. Then we'll look at the direction finder. I've mentioned the direction finder filter before, but we'll take another look at it in deeper detail. And then we'll go and look at some other filters or the ways that your timeline modifies or in some way guides your perception on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. So we'll be looking again at frequency counter, the convincer, the limiter, and the social binder. Now there are other aspects of your timeline filters that are important, and hopefully you'll be able to identify some and share them with us. And then finally, we're going to wrap it up in the last part, dealing with root cause events. What events in your past had such a transformative experience for you that you have changed and you are no longer the same? Now, some of these root cause events are extremely positive and should be just treated as that, a blessing. But others are not. Others, root cause events, have caused us to limit ourselves and to adopt behaviors which are not resourceful. And then how can we cleanse those from our timeline? And that's what the last part of this is. We'll actually be talking about a guided meditation for cleaning and preparing your timeline for a more successful future. Some terms that we'll be going through, again, we're talking about root cause event. I mention this repeatedly because it's important. And anything that I repeat is something that I consider to be of vital importance for you to understand. And one of the aspects of the timeline I think is important is how you are oriented. How are your goals in life oriented? Do you have a past orientation, a present orientation, or a future? How do you make decisions about what you are going to do next? By looking at the past, the present, or the future? And then there's an aspect here where there's knowledge. You have knowledge, but it's knowledge that you are not conscious of. A real kind of basic example of that is that you know how to heal your skin if you get a cut. Well, you do because you do it, but you do not have a conscious understanding of the steps required to stop the bleeding, to put a temporary scab over the wound, and then to heal the various cells and to bring it all together, and then to release it. You don't know how to do it, but you can do it, and you do it all the time whenever needed. So we are riddled with this unconscious knowledge. Part of my job is to get you to trust that and to seek out and find other types of hidden knowledge that you have and that you have as an ability, and to trust it. And then finally, something that I call timeline reconciliation. When you have reconciled all of the previous things on your timeline, you automatically resolve the future of your timeline too. By cleansing the past, you cleanse the future. Okay, so that's what I call reconciliation, or cleansing your timeline. So what is a timeline? So you can think of it as a series of chronological events from the time you are born until the present, and then projecting up into the future. And your timeline is organized and sorted and maintained in your subconscious. And you may not even be aware that you are doing this, but every event is cataloged in a frame, and the frame is stored. So if you are to think back, as the example we used some units ago about our first day of school, you will pull up a frame and it is located on your timeline. Then, next to that frame where your first day of school is located are other frames that are closely related to that period in time that you now have access to. So this is a way, when people are using various types of memory recall or regression, is you remember the things that you can easily recall, and then you can begin to discover the things that are adjacent to it that you can then, which were previously hidden from you, that may become revealed. And any of you that may have had hypnosis or watched a hypnotic procedure to recall events, that's basically how you do it. Okay? So your timeline is personal and it's unique to you. Okay? No one else's timeline is identical. Maybe some similarities between you and, say, your sister or your brother, but none of them are identical. Now, here's something that I want to let you think about, is that your timeline can extend beyond your birth. So you have a date or a time when you were born, and then your timeline starts. But in reality, your timeline extends into your past. So you are today dealing with events and things in your past lives. And by past lives, I mean your ancestral past. What did your grandfather, your great-grandfather, etc., what did your descendants do that are affecting you today? And I know many people that are going through day-to-day feelings of stress based on not what happened to them in their timeline, but what happened to their ancestors in their timeline. So it's very, very common. So when we do the timeline cleanse, we may in fact have to go beyond the point where you were born to previous lives that have affected you today. So to do this, we're actually be going to what I call hidden information. So this is the unconscious knowledge. Your subconscious knows exactly what and when things began to impact you, but you don't need to know that. So there's information that is really like data about things that you experience or your ancestors experienced that are affecting you today. So this information has no real emotional content. The emotional content is stored separately. And this is the key to healing your timeline, is that if you find an event that is emotionally charged that may be affecting you today, you have the ability to discharge or release or let that emotional energy go. Okay? And this is called a release. So you have that ability and you have that power. The trick is, if you are unaware of that, if it's hidden information, if you're not aware of that, then you can't release it. So part of what we'll be doing is learning how to use our subconscious to release content, emotional content. In most cases, you probably want to keep the information about previous events. Some of it may be very pertinent or relevant to you today, but not all of it. Okay, so to wrap this up in this slide, what I'm saying is that when we'll be cleaning our timeline, we'll really be neutralizing emotional content. And that's the key there. So for your subconscious, time is always one context. It's always now. So your subconscious does not parse out the future, does not parse out the past, does not parse out previous lives or ancestral lineage. It only looks at a frame. It looks at the content of the frame and then assesses whether there's a mental state change required or a behavioral change required. In all cases, your subconscious will evaluate a frame as to whether it is something that needs to protect you from. So your subconscious is always going to protect you. So if a frame has material that is in some way stressful mentally or emotionally, the subconscious will just hide it. However, your subconscious always remembers the content, always remembers the frame, and always reacts. So your subconscious, it's always now, it always remembers, and it always reacts. And the key here is that if this is done via a filter, then your subconscious may prevent you from experiencing something in your conscious level. There's a lot of reasons why your subconscious would want to do that, because what we really want is to be focused on the content that you need to work with to achieve your next step or your next level. Okay, so your subconscious knows that, and if there's material that would be disruptive, it just hides it. I often think of this one aspect of the power of filtering. You could have a spirit, a guiding spirit standing right beside you now, and you not see it, hear it, feel it, or acknowledge it. Why? Because it has no value for you to become conscious of it. It doesn't change the guidance and the help that that spirit may be providing you. And for most people, to be aware of an entity standing beside you would be very frightening. It would bother me. And your subconscious knows that. And I'm not saying that there are spirits standing beside you at this moment, but a lot of people do believe that there's other levels. But it's not relevant for you to be aware of those on a moment-to-moment basis. Why? Because you need to be aware of the specific content necessary. So this filtering process is huge, and we'll be looking at it more and more. So there's a way around this filtering process, which is to just let your subconscious do it. Okay, so here's one aspect of your timeline that your subconscious is implementing on a moment-to-moment basis, which you may not be aware of. You perceive time in a specific location. You may perceive time to be directly ahead of you as that arrow pointing towards the present. And you may view the future as something to your right or to your left. This is like a direction finder. So where are your past events located? Is the past, when you see people look, they kind of look to maybe their left or to the right when they're thinking of the past. And if you watch people talking about past events, you can look to where their eyes move. So this particular orientation of the direction finder is sometimes considered to be the personality type of a judger. Someone who can see their present, their past, and the future laid out in front of them, much like the way a judge would judge events that are happening. So if you have a table and you have some events that are in the past in one part of the table, your present in the center of the table, and the future events, you can then kind of manipulate it like a chessboard or like a game, i.e. like a judger. So this way of looking at your timeline or processing your timeline, it will affect your personality. But let's look at another orientation of your direction finder. The direction of a perceiver. So you have your future. For a perceiver, will tend to see the future as somewhere. And if you ask someone who's a perceiver a question about the future, you'll again watch their eyes. You'll see they'll tend to look straight ahead, right, or slightly up. And their past, they may even point to their back when they're talking about the past. They may even flash their hands and say, oh, that was in the past, right? And you see people make those gestures. So people who make gestures about their timeline as an expanse in front of them, like a judger, and those that talk about it as something behind them is the past. The key thing here is look at the present. The present has a very ambiguous kind of thing. It's kind of left or right. So this jumps up. If we look at these personality types, and we'll be going more into personality types when we go into meta programs, but let's just look at these two main types here. People who are judgers will tend to organize and be prepared. They like to make a plan. They are comfortable following rules. And I kind of think maybe I fall into that category. I like to be organized. I like to make lists and make plans. But there are people who are more perceivers, and they like to keep their options open, which is that ambiguity of the, let me go back here. That's the ambiguity of the present, right? They like to keep it left or right open. And perceivers are very spontaneous, okay? So if you know someone who kind of falls into the category of a judger, or you know someone who falls into the category of a perceiver, ask them that question, and here's the question: if you were to point at where your future is located, where would your future be? Would it be in front of you, behind you, to your left, or to your right? And then match that up with whether they are a judger or perceiver. So that's your exercise 10, is to play with the direction finder of your timeline. Do it for yourself. Identify your orientation of where you see the future. And are you a judger or a perceiver? Then gently do that with some of your friends and see if this actually is true. And then later on, we'll learn how you can flip yourself between being a judger and a perceiver by merely changing how you perceive your timeline. When we are looking at filters, in particular this one that I'm interested in sharing with you called the time filter, we have to understand how the subconscious treats time. Time for the subconscious realm is different than it is for our day-to-day conscious activities. So we'll talk about that. And so here's some aspects of the time filtering process that we have that I think is interesting. Something called the direction finder, how you orient yourself to your timeline. The frequency counter, we're counting our activities and then connecting it to the frequency of events similar to it on our timeline. What's possible and impossible, we determine what's possible in our reality based on the outcome or lack of outcomes in our timeline. And then finally, I'm going to talk about something that I call a root cause event. And I personally believe, and there's lots of research to support this, that any issues we might have in our current reality, in our current day-to-day, stem from a specific event in the past, a root cause event, that since that time you changed, something happened in your past that created such an impact that from that point on you were different. It caused a transformation inside of you and you reacted differently. Sometimes some of these transformations are good and resourceful. We're interested in the transformations from root cause events that are in fact unresourceful and that may be limiting you in your ability to get what you want on a day-to-day basis. So we'll look at root cause events. The bottom line here is that if there was some magical way of healing that root cause event from the past, then you in the present will be healed. And it's only by healing that event from the past that you can heal yourself today. So let's go into it. So as we've been talking before, our conscious mind is really only 10% of our realm, and that the subconscious does a whole whack of things that we just don't have the time to do. We're busy. And in the conscious realm, if you see at the top up here, they talk, and I kind of agree with this in this slide, that willpower is something of the conscious mind. that you will things to happen and your subconscious participates. But then look at the next three: long-term memory, logical thinking, and critical thinking. All three of those are connected to your timeline, right? Your memory is in your timeline. Your logical thinking can only happen when you compare things to when things should happen, and your critical thinking. So it's all very much a time, present, past, and future relationship. However, your subconscious doesn't work that way. Your subconscious only looks at cause and events. So when a frame, we'll go back to frames now, when a memory frame is recalled, your subconscious treats it the same whether it is something happening in the past, currently in the present, or projected to the future. Your subconscious treats all frames equally. So in essence, your subconscious doesn't parse out time in the same way as we do on our day-to-day conscious level. And this is important because those of you who do have root cause events that were traumatic in the past, they hurt as much today as they did in the past, and maybe even more. Okay, so let's look at the direction finder. So what I'd like you to do, if you are interested in participating, is to orient yourself towards the future. For you, where is the future? Is it something straight ahead of you? Is it to your left? Or is it to your right? What direction is your future? And this makes a difference. And we'll be talking about this quite a bit in some of our other sessions. But let's just put it this way for this particular discussion. If you are someone who has pointed straight ahead, that makes you a very direct, goal-oriented person, doesn't it? If you are a person who saw your past or your future either to your right or to your left, this makes you a more of a pensive, thoughtful person. So you're going to look at your timeline as if it's laid out in front of you on a screen or on a table, and you're going to assess your whole timeline before you make a decision. So this kind of effect on the way that you process information is directly related to how you see, how you orient it your direction. And there's other things in here, but I think that's one to just get started with. Figure out for yourself which way, which direction do you think the future is. Now, remember, there's no right or wrong, and you can change these for specific effects. Let's look at this one, a frequency counter. Now, this is one that has a couple of different uses. If something has happened 0 times, has never happened in your past, so you look at something and it has never happened before, that has a very special meaning. And people who are faced with a frequency of 0 when they're making up their minds to do something will react in one of two main ways. One, if it has never happened, if it's a 0, they may decide that they want to do it. Wow, I've never done that before. I really want to do that, and get excited and motivated to do something that has a frequency counter of 0. There are others that when they see a frequency counter of 0, they say, no, I don't think I can do that. I've never done that before. So this is very important to know if you are a never do it again, or have never done it and want to do it, or have never done it and will never do it. Which type are you? And this can be flipped. You can flip this around for your various effect. The number 1 is a very interesting one. So if someone sees that an event has happened once before, again, there's at least two possible ways this person can react. And this will be consistent. This is the way they will react most times to the number 1 event counter. They may say, oh, I've done that before. I am not going to do it again. So there are those people who will only do something once. So once they hit a counter of 1, that's it. They won't, or they don't want to, or they resist, or make a fuss. And there are others that say, oh, a 1, I've done that before. Let's do it again. That was whatever. Let's see if I can improve it. Or it was fun. Whatever rationale they'll put when they see 1 counter for an event, they'll be more motivated to do it again versus those that see a 1. It's like those people who never want to watch the same movie again. And me, I can watch the same movie over and over. Then the number 2 and more is a very interesting one. When it's a number 2 or more, these people will either become more committed or less committed. So some people, the more often they do something, it has a reverse effect in making them not want to do it anymore. They become more and more resistant. Now, there's another way this frequency counter works. Sometimes for people, they need to hear something or be asked to do something a certain number of times. Some people will do something on the first frequency counter, but some need to hear it twice, some 3, and possibly some 4. And the frequency counter, unless they have been talked to or suggested to 4 different times, they will not act. So this is like a convincer. How many times do you need to hear something before you're convinced to act? Now, here's the key. If you're working with someone or with yourself, and you ask them to do something very simple, note how many times you have to ask them. You might have to try a couple different things, like, oh, pass me the butter, and they don't do anything. You say, oh, I really like to get that butter. Still don't do anything. And you say, hey, Joe, please pass me the butter. And I go, oh, okay, I'm sorry, here. And they pass you the butter. Took 3 times. Now, here's the kicker. That's the way Joe will be most of the time, regardless of the immensity of the decision that they have to make, or no matter how trivial it is. Something as trivial as passing the butter, they had to be asked 3 times. Something as big as buying a house, they got to be convinced 3 times. Very powerful thing. So know where you are on this particular on your frequency counter. Now, there's different aspects of this, but those are a couple of the big ones: the number 0, the number 1, and the number 2 or more. Let's look at this other one in regards to time, and this has to do with sequencing and where you position yourself on the timeline. And this will, for some people, determine whether they think something is possible or they think something is impossible. You will look at yourself and you will say, oh, I can't do this because of where you are in the timeline. You may say, well, I am too young to do something, or I am too old to do something, right? And that will be possible or impossible. You might say, oh, because of my age, this is very appropriate for my age. I will do this. Now, this becomes even more and more significant as you age. You will tend to limit what is possible based on where you are in your timeline frequency, timeline range. So as you get older, you may find yourself limiting your possibilities. Okay, but it's purely something that you have put into your timeline. So here's the big one that I think we can do a lot of work with: your root cause event. So in your timeline, there's an event that shapes you as you are today and will shape you as you will be tomorrow. So it has all the what, where's, when, why's, and who's, but more importantly, when. So when you go along your timeline, there will be a singular root cause event that may have been reinforced many times after, but there's a key one. that if you can neutralize that root cause event, it will take away the pain and suffering and limitations of all the following occurrences of that event, anything similar. So you might have an event in your past that limits you. Then as you go along in your current present state, you will match up anything that you're perceiving in your present future with the possibility of that event. If you get a match, then it will determine how you react. Now, again, as I said, if it's a very resourceful reaction, you become strong and you tackle the issues and you go forward, fantastic. Leave it alone. But if it's a root cause event that causes you to have fear, anxiety, to limit yourself and to not go forward, if it becomes a very unresourceful effect of your root cause event, then you may want to look at it. Now, there are lots of therapies that involve actually reliving root cause events. The approach that I've kind of grown to doesn't do that. I'm not a proponent of reliving trauma. However, there is a way of releasing the trauma or releasing the energy associated with a root cause event without reliving it. And so this is what I call cleansing or clearing your timeline of all limiting root cause events. Okay, now I'll be honest with you, it does take work. It does take time. And in my last bonus topic, I talked about the fact that the more you practice, the more you do this, the better you get at it, and the more effective you become at cleaning your timeline. Very resourceful people spend a lot of time being resourceful, and they spend a lot of time at achieving their levels of success. They don't just sit home and wait for it. You've got to go and get it. So we'll be talking about this timeline meditation. It's a guided meditation to clean your timeline. Now, you will probably, if you choose to do this guided meditation with me, you'll probably enjoy it. But what I want you to be able to do is to do this meditation on your own and to make variations of it. And I'll give this little story. I was doing some work in a group home, and I was doing something like the timeline, not exactly, but kind of like it. And one of the young fellows said, "Oh, I've got one for you, Steve. Can I tell you my guided meditation?" And he told me a guided meditation that was fantastic, and I must try to replicate it. It's called Melting the Snowman. And the snowman was all of the things that limit you. The snowman was all of your pain. The snowman represented all the things that froze you. And then what he did in his guided meditation, which is rather beautiful, he melted the snowman slowly. And as the snowman melted, all of your tensions, all of your fears, all of your anxiety went away with the melting snow. Very beautiful guided meditation. So that's another example of working with an imagery to deal with a root cause event. But we'll get more into that later. So here's the thing. When you look at your timeline, there will be events. And so we have a way of traversing your timeline by utilizing your subconscious. You will get good at using your subconscious. You may not remember the details of your timeline, but your subconscious mind does. Your subconscious remembers all of the details, even though you may not remember. Now, here's the trick of how this works. Your timeline is there all the way, and your subconscious knows it. Your subconscious may protect you from information that may harm or hurt you. So you may not be able to consciously see the information on your timeline, but your subconscious does. Your subconscious has said, oh, I don't want to show you this because it hurt you before and I don't want to hurt you again, so I'm going to make it invisible. I'm going to filter it. So your subconscious filters out painful content, but that painful content still affects you. So these root cause events, until healed, will affect you. You just can't see them. You can't see what's causing you to react the way you are, but it's still there. Okay, I hope you understood this. So bottom line, your subconscious can see your entire timeline. You consciously have a filtered version of your timeline. You tend to only see the parts of your timeline that are rosy, rose-colored glasses. Well, that's it for your quick little bonus topic. We obviously will be going into the time filter in great detail later on, but I thought it'd be worthwhile to share this with you to give you an idea of where we're going in the future with the timeline filter. Okay, that's it for today.